Welcome to this short video lecture on bilingualism and biliteracy and why biliteracy is important for our bilingual students. Just a brief reminder, we've looked at this thresholds model before, where we looked at the ideal place for bilingual students in schools to end up is at the top floor of this ladder of proficiency, where they can use both of their languages or all of their languages indeed for multiple purposes, and that one of the pieces that needs to be in place for that to happen is they need to develop literacy in the school language. And so this is why we're talking about biliteracy rather than just talking about literacy in the school language, but also in the home language. And so we're going to talk particularly about a method that was developed by Jim Cummins and Margot Earley in Canada in the 1990s, but has continued to be written about and continued to be used in schools. And it's called identity texts. And identity texts are developed across the two languages, the student's home or dominant language and the school language. And they help students connect new information and skills to their background. They help communicate their background and their stories to the class. And they've been shown to provide students a basis to produce better literacy texts in the school language as well. And so this also helps develop kind of an awareness of the specialized language of school subjects and the relationship between the school and the home languages. So this is an example of a dual language identity text. It was created by a young refugee in Canada. You can see she's got her home language on one side, and then she worked with a peer to translate the story she'd written into English. And so you can find a lot of examples of dual language identity texts online, and there are these little bilingual storybooks created by the students themselves, written in their home language, translated into English or the school language, and illustrated. And so it's not a particularly challenging activity to do with students in terms of, the integration of home languages, and you get kind of a lot of positive outcomes from it. There are other ways we can support home language, not necessarily at school, but with a partnership. And so we're going to talk about home, community, complementary schools, and migrant churches. So in terms of the home, it's really important to build homeschool links and partnerships with parents, because we know that what happens in the home is a significant contributing factor to students' education as well. And so if we're not connected with the parents, we're missing opportunities to find out what are they learning about at home, what do they know, what can they do. And so you can do all kinds of different things on parent partnerships to do with literacy practices. You can encourage them to do oral storytelling. You can send home picture books or wordless books and ask them to use those as a prompt for storytelling. And you can do kinds of different community interactions around the stories or histories of your community. And so all of these will build a child's literacy capacity through the home language, which will have a positive effect on their school language literacy development as well. Complementary schools are called different things in different places. They're called complementary schools in the UK. They are voluntary organizations run by migrant groups. They meet the cultural needs of a specific group and the language needs of a specific group. Some of them focus on religious traditions and some of them don't. It really varies. But the aim is to protect and preserve the cultural and linguistic heritage of migrant groups in their new home country. There are estimates there between 3,000 and 5,000 complementary schools in England right now. It's very hard to have an exact number because they're not all registered under that kind of name. And so some of them are very ad hoc. They just happen in somebody's living room, every week. But we do know that there's a significant amount. In other countries, they're called different things. In Canada, they're called heritage language schools. The Canadian Multilingualism Act or Multiculturalism Act actually provides financial support to cultural groups who want to have community language schools. And so that's different from the UK, where they have to be funded by the parents and the community. And it's interesting to kind of find out in the context you're living, if you're not living in the UK or working in the UK right now, what is available. I know that there's different things in different places. Switzerland has quite a well-developed network of home language schools through the cantons that actually a lot of people don't know about, but they are there. And so it's good to find out what those resources are, because then you can talk to parents about the opportunity to engage with these kinds of complementary schools. The benefits of attending community or language schools, this is from research in the UK, but we can think of it as being, quite consistent no matter where we have these same kinds of groups. The first kind of set of benefits is to do with language learning and exploring bilingualism. And we know that having a bilingual identity actually is correlated with stronger academic performance. Regardless of your level of proficiency, that identity as a bilingual is good. The second is kind of the cultural component and helping children maintain their links with their family and with their community through their language and through the kind of cultural aspects of the community language school. These schools can and do sometimes reinforce the mainstream curriculum of the school as well and provide additional support for mainstream school learning. So the kids may bring work that they're doing in their regular school and get support in their home language or just talk about it or explore it in their home language. And then some community language schools, not all again, broaden the curriculum out and provide additional lessons in music or dance or geography or history of their country, or religious education, citizenship. There are all different kinds of iterations of community language schools with different priorities. But it's really, really good as people who work in schools to know what is around you and what is available so that you can direct parents to these. Because we know that it also actually has a really positive effect on students in terms of their identity formation, in terms of fostering their identity as, a member of a particular cultural community. It has a positive impact on their social and educational identities as a multilingual, multicultural person. And it helps them kind of integrate the three different identities that they wear in these schools as a heritage language learner, as a learner, and as a multicultural person. And so there are lots of really good reasons to support your children in finding the right community language school. And if it's not available, there's a real space for schools to open up their premises on weekends or after school to these groups to support and facilitate these kind of groups being formed. There's also the aspect of migrant religion and migrant churches of any denomination. There are some religions that have a particular literacy as a key component of that religion. And so, for example, the most common example is the Arabic language is associated with the practice of Islam. And so if you may have students in your school who are not Arabic speakers, but who go to Arabic complementary schools to learn Quranic Arabic and to practice their religion. And so sometimes the Arabic they need for the practice of their religion is different from their own language. For example, if Turkish-speaking families will speak Turkish in the home, but the children may access an Arabic Quranic school or a complementary school where they need Arabic. And so we need to know, because that's an additional language in a child's profile that wouldn't be necessarily there if we only ask about their kind of passports, their parents. And so in these communities, literacy development in the religious language is not always the home language as well. There can be different dialects, different varieties, or it can be indeed another language completely. Literacy practices are usually developed in church-sponsored community language schools or heritage language schools as a part of being able to, read the text that they need to read. And so they do support literacy as well. So to sum up all these three pieces on literacy, which were quite chunky, going all the way back to part one, we talked about monoglot literacy, which really requires the adherence to one strict set of rules and respect for the standard variety, and how unrealistic and not really inclusive that is. We talked about that it doesn't reflect how monolinguals use language, and especially it doesn't reflect how bilinguals use language as a part of their literacy practices. We talked about critical literacy practices, which are about inviting participants into the text that they're reading, rather than having them just read it and accept it as correct. How do we question what we're reading? How do we think about word choice? How do we dig a little deeper into the cultural or political or whatever social aspects of a text are there? And this allows students to engage their prior knowledge, and it also gives us as teachers insight into what parts of a particular text they don't have access to because they don't have kind of the cultural background that they need. We looked at challenges for students, including cultural knowledge, vocabulary development, and the influence of their first language on writing. And then we looked at ways and means of promoting home language literacy at school, at home, and in complementary or heritage language schools. If you are looking for some fun stuff to follow up, there's a link you can follow to a web page about identity texts. That's quite good. And there's a really wonderful little poetry anthology called Poems from a School, which were all developed with multilingual students. And you can see an example here on the screen of a young Korean student and his trilingual poem. He wrote it in English, he wrote it in Korean, and he wrote it in Korean in the Roman alphabet so that we can read it kind of phonetically. And so you can go and have some fun with those. Thank you very much, and see you again soon.